Now I would like to talk about the concept of relative effort and how to know if you are training hard enough. Those age-old questions that all athletes have always asked themselves since time immemorial, the dawn of the Olympic era. Am I training as hard as I should be? Am I training hard enough? Am I training too hard? How hard should I train? How hard should I be pushing myself? Well, there are a number of factors to consider. First is RPE. That's why I talked about it first. You want to make sure it's as accurate as it possibly can be, that you've tested it by going to true failure and staying within that range that I taught you about. But this is only the first factor of relative effort. The second is your pump, or your burn. Some exercises and heavy loads especially won't give you much of a pump or burn, but you should generally feel something. Now, of course, pump and burn are different things, and generally the more pump the better, but you don't need to feel like you're going to explode. And some burn is good, but you don't need to feel like you're completely on fire and about to, melt into a pool of molten lava or anything like that. So somewhere in between feeling nothing and feeling like you're going to explode like a volcano of molten lava is where that sweet spot of the right amount of pump and burn are. Next, number 3 is muscle disruption. This is an interesting concept. It's something that you feel right after training, like your muscles have been disrupted. That, they should feel as though they have just done a lot of work, okay, and exerted a lot of force and energy, and they don't feel right anymore. They don't feel the same. They feel weird or maybe a bit achy, okay, but there should be some feeling that work has been done and your muscles have been taxed and disrupted, because there should be a level of depletion and damage that you can feel, and that is what we call muscle disruption. So if you do not feel anything in your muscle after your session for the rest of the entire day, you probably could have trained much harder than that, all right? But if your muscles are so disrupted that, they hurt or you can't function, sometimes I can't get to sleep because my muscles feel so disrupted. They're just sending my brain all of these signals through my nervous system. That's when you might have trained too hard. Next, number 4 is soreness, or DOMS. DOMS stands for delayed onset muscle soreness. And that is the soreness that you feel the next day when you have this sort of dry, burning sensation when you stretch out your muscle, and you really feel that deep soreness. That is what we define as DOMS. And that kind of soreness is not actually a must-have. Not for every muscle group and every type of exercise, generally speaking. A lot of times you won't get sore from very good exercises, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you haven't trained hard enough or anything bad, all right? It probably just has to do with the specific exercise selection. And this is because only certain stimuli produce soreness, especially eccentric stimuli. But if you never get sore from any exercises, then you know that your training is probably limited in some ways, all right? However, if you are often too sore to recover in time for your next session and are still sore when it comes time to train again, then you are training too hard and are in fact overtraining. So somewhere in the middle of those two is where the sweet spot is. And then the 5th and last aspect of relative effort is fatigue. Good workouts use energy, a good amount of it, and make you tired. All right, so if you need more sleep after a training session, that's a good sign. That is a sign that you have trained hard. Okay, and so conversely, if you are not tired at all after your training session, then you probably haven't trained as hard as you possibly could or should have. All right, you probably could have put more energy and effort into your training session. But if you are too tired to function after your training session and get extra sleep that night, but even after getting extra sleep, then you are still too tired the next day and your performance at work the next day is depleted, then you trained too hard. You were overtraining. That is too much fatigue for you to recover from. All right, you should only be training as hard as you can recover from, especially, first and foremost with the tiredness and your ability to get more sleep to compensate for the energy spent in training and the fatigue that you accrue. So those are the 5 factors factors that you can judge your relative effort based upon. And you should generally be on a middle ground with all 5 of them, okay, throughout most of your training. However, at the beginning of a block of progressive overload or during a maintenance and active rest phase, then your overall relative effort should be lower, okay? And so you can be on the lower side of these, all right? But at the end of a block of progressive overload, your relative effort should go up. And that is when it is okay to push yourself harder and further and to be on the other end of all of those factors with a much higher overall relative effort. Okay, so most of the time your relative effort should be moderate and a middle ground with all 5 factors. But you do want to progress with it and be raising your relative effort as you do progressive overload of the other training variables. So if your training is too easy, you want to add more work to it and increase the relative effort. All right, and this could be by increasing the volume or increasing your training technique and making it harder. But one way or another, you want to be training harder and harder week by week, raising your relative effort. And you may find that some other factors in addition to these 5 may come into play, such as motivation, energy level, and it could be different for different people. But in the end, your relative effort is relative and it's going to be a very personal thing. And so it's up to you to judge in yourself how much energy you have and how much effort you have to spend on your training and should be for where you are at in your program. All right, so just moderate it and manage your energies and try to generally not spend too much or too little in any workout, and just train for where you are at in your program and maintain a good overall energy balance, because as I'm sure you remember from the last part of the program on the science of hypertrophy, energy balance is key to anabolism. So that's why it's important to manage your energies. Make sure you're not spending more than you have to spend and are using the right amount of energy for where you are at, especially when training hard and harder step by step, week after week of progressive overload. So these 5 aspects of relative effort and your energy levels are great ways to gauge whether or not you are training hard enough and to manage your energies and be able to push yourself harder and harder and monitor your energy levels and your effort so that you know where your limits are and being able to push yourself to your limits appropriately. So these different aspects of relative effort are ways of knowing when we are approaching our limits and when we then need to back off. Okay, so that is very important. When you are using this concept of relative effort to push yourself to the max, and you are pushing yourself to the point where each one of these factors, or most of them, are telling you that you are training as hard as possible and that you are maxing out your energies and effort, that is your body signaling you that you are peaking. You have achieved your maximum performance potential. And so once you get there, you want to back it off, and you should only be maxing out your relative effort when you are going to be able to do a deload week and focus on active recovery after that. Because maxing out your relative effort and spending all of your energies training as hard as you possibly can is very taxing on the body, and so when you have reached that level of effort, you're going to also reach a very high level of things such as soreness and fatigue. Okay, and as I said, there will be other factors that will come into play, especially if you are pushing yourself as hard as you possibly can, maxing out your effort. You'll start to also notice that you've maxed out things such as your motivation, and now you are depleted with that. And so it's very important that you only do this at the end of progressive overload when you can focus on recovery afterwards, so that you can focus on healing all of that soreness and those aches and pains. When you are working out and creating a massive burn, that's because of lactic acid in your muscles. That means that you need more recovery. And when you're creating soreness that lasts a long time, there is inflammation that goes along with that. And that's another factor that can come up, and will only come up when you are training with a high relative effort, is that you will start to see more inflammation and aches and pains, and that is a sign that you are maxing out your energies and are training too hard, and in fact overtraining. All right, so look out for that. All right, and that's why that wasn't on this list at all. Okay, there's some aches and pains that you really shouldn't be having for the most part, maybe only a little bit here or there, but if you are starting to get serious aches and pains in not just your muscles, but your connective tissue, your tendons and ligaments, and your joints, those are definitive signs that you are pushing yourself too hard and need to back it off. So whenever you have maxed out your relative effort, make sure you do that deload week to focus on recovery afterwards. That is the only way to safely raise the intensity that high.